that because they went first to the capital city where they thought a king should be. My guess is that they thought that the king of the household would be fully aware that there had been a baby born, because they probably thought that the baby was born into the line of Herod. They probably thought that this king, and I'm saying king and not Messiah because as we read the text, the wise men use the term king and the Jewish people use the term Messiah. The word Messiah simply means anointed one, and a king would be anointed. So you've got a little difference going on there. But I believe that these wise men were looking for something that they thought that all of Judea was well aware of. You remember what they asked when they got there? Where is this child that is born king? They thought that they would know. They didn't think that they would have to hunt him down. They figured they'd go there and they would find him. I think they were sure that they would experience a palace instead of what they found. And I'm sure that they expected the Israelites to be excited about this happening, that everybody would be celebrating. It's not what they found at all, was it? It's not what they had been thinking that they would find. In my mind, at least that's what I believe. It's not what they thought they would find. And yet, when they found Jesus, they worshipped. When they found Jesus in the mean, not mean as in angry, but mean as in not having a lot, stable, with nothing much around, being laid in actually they probably didn't find him there, did they? They probably found him in a house. Of course, the stable was attached to the house in those days, but they probably found him in a house. Matter of fact, it might not have even been the same year that he was born. They may not even have found him in Bethlehem. Now, there's debates, scholarly debates on this, that he might have been back at home in Galilee where they had come from for the census, that Mary and Joseph probably 8 days later went to the temple and had a circumcision and everything else that they needed to do, and then they went home. So it's kind of interesting in these debates. We don't know as much as we think we know as we put up the pictures of, or the major scenes each year of the wise men and the stables. It's really not what we think we know. Neither was it for the wise men. When they came, they didn't find what they thought they would find. But they celebrated anyway. And they celebrated and gave gifts anyway. And I thought about this all week. I was pondering this. How can you talk about three wise men in another way after 10 or 15 years of preaching every second Sunday after Christmas about wise men? And as I thought about this, I thought more and more about how unexpected what they found probably was for them. And yet they still knew they needed to celebrate. They still knew they needed to pay homage to this king, to this one that they had seen the sign in the stars. You know, they didn't have the scriptures that the Jews had. You know how hard it was to get a hold of those scrolls. The scrolls were assigned to the different synagogues in those days, and that's probably the only place you're going to find scrolls. People didn't have a Bible, the Old Testament, they could take home with them and read. They had to unroll the scrolls. You remember when Jesus went to his home synagogue and they unrolled the scroll of Isaiah and he read his piece from Isaiah before he preached it at home. It's unlikely that these men who were not Jews, who were Gentiles, who were from a faraway country, would have had access to the text to know what it was that was supposed to be happening, to know what was happening. But God spoke to them truth anyway. All truth is God's truth, and somehow God arranged it that they would know that when that star rose, that something important happened, that a king had been born. Somehow they knew, and they came and they worshiped. As I thought about all this, I began to think, how many things in my life have happened that were different than I thought they would be? How many stars did I think I was following and I thought they would settle over somewhere else? And they ended up settling where I ended up, obviously. And I'm wondering if that's true with you. I promised to tell you a story about me. If somebody in this congregation will tell me a story about a time where you ended up someplace completely different than you thought. I'm not talking then about not asking for directions. I'm talking life stories. You know, where you thought this job was going to happen and you ended up in that job or whatever. But somebody's got to have a story like that, of course. Can't be just me. That ends up in the wrong place.
as spiritual as I was at the time, I guess. I had stopped going to church when I got my first job in 10th grade. I worked at Conrow, and we're open on Sundays, so I worked Sundays, and my whole family stopped going to church. And I knew once we had the kids that something was missing. So I found a church that let me sleep late. And God found me instead. So it was kind of not what I got more than I bargained for, and it's a blessing.
And now she's here at 8:30 for worship.
Yeah.
God has a sense of humor as well. Terry, I saw your hand up as well. Do you want to share a story with us?
Sure. I had been laid off from a job, and I wasn't looking particularly for another job because I don't need to work. But God found a job for me by way of about. I attended retreat and was speaking with my table leader, who happened to be a pastor's wife. And we really didn't talk about jobs or anything. She knew I was laid off, and next thing I know, I was sitting one day at the computer, minding my own business and dealing with renovating a house. And I got an email that said, "I'm pastor of such and such church, and we're looking for a secretary, and we'd like to talk to you because my wife said you would be good." So I went down and got the job, but I had no intention of, looking for a job at that point. We were renovating the house, so I was making a lot of decisions on